Good afternoon and welcome to this live video interview and broadcast. We are so glad you're joining us. I'm Heinz Winckler from lovekey.church in Somerset West, Cape Town, and it's my privilege today to be with you. I always tell people when you are on stage or in an interview, the last thing you must do is to start with an apology. But I'm going to have to break my own rule today and apologize for starting so late. I'm sure people logged on and didn't find us and had to go, but I'm hoping they will watch this later or join us now. So we are talking about a very important and pressing matter, and if we have time, we're going to look at one or two others as well. But I'm very privileged to say that I have two amazing people online that we are going to bring into this interview today. I'm going to introduce them, and then we are going to have a great chat with them. First up, this was a surprise to me as well today, a very pleasant surprise. Michael Swain is here, and we are very, very happy to welcome him to this talk today. So thank you, Michael. Let me just get you on my... Yeah, there we go. That's better. I'm so glad you're here. How are you, my friend?
Well, my body is here. My mind is still probably somewhere transatlantic because I just got back from the States.
Totally understandable. My word, I can only imagine. And then we have Liesl Pretorius as well from FORSA. It's so great to have you with us as well. Welcome, Liesl. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Heinz. I'm very well. We have a lot of work to do at the moment, so it's great. We're busy and active.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna get right to it. I am going to just for now. Let me just remember how I do this. Okay, Michael, we are gonna focus on chatting about the spy bill. Now, I think I find that sometimes we have people who are watching that don't even know what a bill is. So maybe start with what is a bill, and then inform us what is the spy bill, and then we'll get into a few questions about that.
Okay, so a bill is basically a piece of legislation or a law that's in a draft form. In other words, it's not in a final form and it's not actually in force or enforceable. It's basically what government have drafted and what they would like to do. And of course, it goes through a process. And during the course of that process, the bill, we have the opportunity as citizens to comment on it, to give our input to it. And obviously, what we're doing is we're looking for it, hopefully, to change as the process goes forward. We want to make sure that our concerns and what we would like to see as an amendment, because don't forget, we, the citizens, we're going to be living under this law. And that's why we have the constitutional right to be involved in what's called meaningful public participation. And that's why it's so important that when these bills do come forward, especially if they potentially could seriously affect how we will live, that we have our opportunity and that we actually do it. We take advantage of it and we have our say.
Absolutely, that's so important. And Michael, I assume by now that people know who you guys are working for. I quickly said FORSA, but just to inform those of our viewers that may not know, FORSA is short for Freedom of Religion South Africa, and Michael Swain heads it up. Liesl works for them. They've got a great team of people who are fighting, and to many of us, it'll seem like it's behind the scenes, fighting for our religious freedoms in South Africa. So first off, Michael, thank you so much for what you guys are doing. We really appreciate it. And secondly, maybe just explain better than I just did why does FORSA exist, and what is your vision and mission?
Well, we specifically exist because the South African Constitution, which is the highest law of the land, it's the law that governs everything else, it grants a specific right. It guarantees, perhaps better said, our specific right to freedom of conscience, religion, thought, belief, and opinion. And what that means is that we have the right to basically, particularly when it comes to our faith, to not only express our faith, but to live out our faith in private and in public. That's why we can go to church. That's why we can assemble together. And we also have the right, very importantly, to pass on our faith to our children as well. And so it is our right to publicly worship God, to live out, to express our faith, and it applies to all faiths equally. And
Yeah.
so, obviously, from our perspective, because although we are faith neutral, we are all obviously Christians. And we want to make sure that the gospel can always be freely preached and proclaimed and lived out so we can celebrate our faith. And that should never, ever be sanctioned by the state or anyone else.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, thanks for doing what you're doing. And for those who are watching and listening, I want to strongly encourage you to go to the FORSA website and support them financially and support them by sharing what they're doing. And today, I'm going to say this a few times. There's a link in the description of this post where you can go to the FORSA page and you can have your say about this Bible. And I'll repeat that a few times. So for now, Michael, can you just help all of us understand why are we even talking about this Bible? Why is it so controversial? I mean, it does sound like something out of a 007 movie. Why is it so controversial?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because you would think that what would the Bible apply to? Well, it would apply to government protecting us from dangerous external forces or people within who are exposing our society to danger. So it was very concerning when the Spy Bill first came out, and it's called the Spy Bill. That's the name we've given it. The full name of it is the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill, or GILAB. But
that's a mouthful.
It's some more than a mouthful. And effectively what it does is it gives the state the power to basically take away all rights of privacy from every single person, so that they can look at anything and everything to do with your life. They can look at your finances. They can look at your browsing history, your internet use, what you say on WhatsApp or LinkedIn, what you watch, what you do, your conversations, everything. They can look at it, and they can basically decide whether or not you are a security risk. Wow. Now, as I said, if you're a spy, if you're like in government giving away secrets or whatever it might happen to be, fair enough. But here's the concern. The first version of this bill actually specifically said they wanted to target churches, non-government organizations, that would be people like FORSA, and religious organizations.
Wow.
And there was a bit of an outcry about that, and they quickly just swept that back under the carpet. And then they produced a new version of the bill, but be careful, because the new version of the bill, the definitions actually don't exclude churches, non-governments, or religious organizations. If anything, the net's now become even wider. So very, very concerning. And the question is, well, who can they investigate and what can they investigate? Let me throw that open to Liesl, because as we often say, the devil is in the definitions.
In the details.
The definitions of this bill. The details, but the definitions of the bill in particular, that's where the dangers lie. So Liesl, maybe you can just go through some of the definitions just to give a sense of how wide it is and who can be actually caught in this net.
Yes. The issue with the Spy Bill is that its definitions are very wide. And the problem with a wide definition in a piece of law is that it makes the application of the law broader. So more things are caught in its net. And there are certain key definitions that we focus on. And if these definitions are improved, then I think 90% of the issues with this bill, or 80% of them, will be solved. But what are these definitions? Firstly, there's a definition of national security. Then there's a definition of threat to national security. And then there's a definition of person or institution of national security interest. And all these definitions are worded in a way that is, like I said, so it's wide, it's vague, so you're not sure where does this definition end and where does it start. That the end result of that is religious institutions, their leaders, their employees, their members, can be caught in the net of this Spy Bill.
Sure.
But also others, non-governmental organizations, private businesses, journalists, activists. It's actually hard to say, where does the Spy Bill's end reach? And then, of course, once they are caught in the net of this Spy Bill, well, then there are consequences that are potentially very detrimental. Because if you are a person of national security interest, or if you are a potential threat to national security, it now means, as the bill is currently worded, that you must be subject to a security competence test.
Sure.
What on earth is this?
Yeah.
This is an invasive and secretive test that allows the government, spies basically, members of the South African Intelligence Agency, to go through personal information Michael has mentioned, medical records, financial records, all your communication emails, your
Wow.
WhatsApps, your Facebook posts, your
Sure.
these days when you're in a meeting, even though it's a private Zoom meeting, we all know about that AI tracker that takes notes on this, all of that
And
potentially.
the cameras that are always on. Sure.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
cameras are always on, so they can go through all of this. Now, the purpose of this security competence test is to determine whether you are now actually a threat to national security. And if you are refused a security clearance certificate, what are the consequences of this? And the big
Yeah.
problem is the consequences of this is not clear. In the original version of this bill, it was said that, let's take churches for example, because they were specifically mentioned, if that a church would need a security clearance certificate to operate. So if the church now, and since we said this current version of the bill is wider,
Yeah.
so now religious institutions, NGOs, others, if they don't have a security clearance certificate, must they cease to operate? Can their doors forcibly be shut down or be shut?
Can
So
I
that
can
has
I,
devastating and far-reaching consequences.
can I just jump in there and ask, have they explained a reason why they would think in the first place that churches will be a hotspot for spies? What is the thinking there? Do you guys know?
I can
Heinz?
speculate.
You can speculate. Okay.
One of the things that the bill specifically identifies is, people who are potentially hostile to government policies, for example.
All right.
And
Okay. So not necessarily
so let's
national security, but
no,
they're
no,
just
no, no, no,
against the government. Okay. All right.
and even more vague terms like people who are doing something which might be stopping South Africans from living a better life. I mean, it is so open-ended and vague. But
Wow.
think like take this conversation that we're having.
Yeah.
Government have a policy; they want to pass this spy bill, right? They want to
Yeah.
be able to look at anything and everything to do with you and to potentially sanction you severely if they, feel that you don't meet the test. Well, what does that mean? Are we opposing? Are we hostile to a government policy? The answer is yes. So
Yeah.
somebody could take this conversation and say, well, you guys are all people of national security interests, and now we need to investigate you and
Wow.
potentially sanction you. And here's the thing: we're not quite sure what the sanctions are going to mean. But one thing we do know, when you look overseas, for example, if you're a person of political interest
Yeah.
overseas, if you were following the issues that happened in the UK with Nigel Farage, he's a member of parliament. He lost his banking access. They
Wow.
shut off his bank accounts. And it
Oh
turns out
wow.
that they've actually, in the UK, shut off the bank accounts for thousands of people. How can you operate without a bank account? Imagine no credit card,
Yo.
no bank account, no access to money, just shut down. Now, that's the sort of thing that would potentially be a consequence if you fall the wrong side of this test.
My goodness. Well, what if enough citizens find that a politician doesn't pass the test? That could get interesting. That what they're doing is not in the best interest of the country. That could get very very interesting. My goodness. All right. Liesl, I kind of interrupted you there in the middle of a lot of stuff that's going on. Is there something that you think is really important still for the general public to know about the spy bill?
Yes, let me just pick up on that. I want to say that the bill's memorandum of explanatory memorandum, it's like this explanatory document that goes with a bill explaining its purpose, said that the purpose of this bill is to combat terrorism financing, money laundering, etc. But the problem is we already have other legislation that was recently updated that deals with those things. So why apply that to the religious sector? We really don't see
Ah,
the
okay.
problem. But let me say then, what's the problem with this bill from a religious freedom point of view? In summary, we are concerned that because these definitions are so wide, that religious institutions, including their leaders, their employees, and their members who are engaged in lawful political activity, advocacy, protest, and dissent, might be caught in the wide dragnet of this bill and might be misidentified as being of national security interest. They
Mm,
might be misidentified as a threat to national security. They will then be wrongly subjected to invasive, secretive investigations which lack proper oversight, accountability, and rights of recourse, because that's another shortcoming of this bill, and
sure.
ultimately be refused security clearance, which may, by implication, we're not sure, mislabel them as terrorists and shut their doors, which will ultimately lead to state regulation of religion, the state saying who can have a church and not. And we
Wow.
ascribe the best intentions to the drafters of the bill. And our approach is to give a constructive, because we want to see the national security of the republic protected. That's
Yeah.
very important. That's an awful constitutional objective. But we also want to see our constitutional democracy protected, our fundamental rights and freedoms upheld. That's why this bill needs to be properly drafted. Its security, its definitions need to be tightened, because we don't want somewhere down the line a person to come into a position of power. There's this bill that by that time is a law, that it has loopholes, and this person abuses the
Yeah.
loopholes
Exactly.
or target popular or powerful voices in the community, including those of religious leaders and religious organizations, to silence them or to harass them.
Sure. And that's a very plausible scenario, is that that can totally happen, especially, let's say, someone of a background with a big following comes in, opposition to someone who's already in government, and there's an election. They can try to, smear that person in any way, shape, or form if they can find enough, quote unquote, dirt on them. And sure, it's actually quite scary. I was just at the Wilberforce Academy, and there were people from the Christian Concern in the UK, and they were explaining thousands and thousands of cases right now happening in the UK of Christians being targeted. They had the one crazy thing, you hear it and you can't even believe it, is that a professor at a Christian college was teaching from the Bible in his class, and it had to do with the subject that's very sensitive, homosexuality, but it was in a classroom at the college. Someone split on him, and the next moment, Homeland Security, or their version of Homeland Security, rocked up and arrested him, and the accusation, or the reason for it, was for terrorism. They used the word terrorism, like he is a terrorist. And so, I mean, this is how crazy this can become, and I'm sure that's why you guys are concerned. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to
Yes.
say, in this country, never mind overseas, in this country, we had a case a few years ago with a Bible school called Creare, and they were literally banned from teaching on sex and sexuality, even though they're a Bible college.
Wow.
By the Human Rights Commission brought the case. That was before FORSA was involved, by the way.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show where this trend is going. And
Yeah.
as you say, it's very concerning that it can be used to potentially cherry pick who is the target and who is not.
Yeah.
The
It
other
seems
thing,
to. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, Heinz.
No. I hear this. There's the vilifying that especially since they in the beginning they were targeting churches and NGOs from the start. It seems to want to vilify a certain type of group of people. So yeah, that's cause for
I
concern.
think I think another thing that we've been concerned about, and that's probably a very critical thing that we need to chat about now, is that when a bill is produced, it normally is allocated to a parliamentary committee. We've had bills before, for example, the Justice Committee would be, say, looking after the hate speech bill or what have you. Now, you would expect that the bill that's dealing with spying would be in front of the intelligence committee. That would be the natural, logical place for it to go.
Yeah.
But they actually set up a specific ad hoc committee. And it took a long time for them to set it up.
Okay.
Now, the other thing which is concerning, of course, is how much time are they giving for us to consider this bill, which is quite complicated, by the way. It is the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill. So it's not just one straightforward thing. It refers to this other bill and that other bill. So what we do is we obviously look at it and we kind of decipher it, if you
It's
like.
a lot of reading. Yeah, sure.
It's a lot of reading, and it's really, you need to apply your mind. And unfortunately, what they did was they decided to open it for public comment on December the 17th, which, of course, is when everybody is now happily on the beach.
Yeah.
And they then closed it for comment on the 31st of January.
Sure.
Now, that is literally not enough time to blink when you come back from holiday. And in fact, of course, what a lot of churches do, and I don't know if you're one of them, but I know many that do, they start the year with, say, a 21-day fast. And everybody, fasts and prays, and, you've got a big... And you're not looking at legislation and thinking we need to be involved in fights and that sort of thing. Not at all. And so got an extension, thankfully. We objected, as did others. We got an extension, but only until the 15th of February. Sure. And they have said, which is next Thursday.
Yeah, it's a week from now.
And they have said that they won't be giving any more opportunity for public comment. They want this thing to go through. They want it to be passed before Parliament closes in May. So this is a super fast track process. So again, you have to ask the question, why?
Why?
Why do we? Why is it so fast?
What's the agenda?
Well, for example, I met in Washington, D.C., a member of Parliament, and he is responsible. He's from a minority party, and he is responsible for actually allocating members of minority parties to parliamentary committees when they discuss or when they're considering pieces of legislation. That's his job. They all talk about what's coming up, and then they say, well, you go for that one and you go for that one, and that's how it works. He didn't even know about it. He didn't even know about it. He asked me to send him information. He was quite horrified because he said, number one, it's before the Intelligence Committee, and number two, we weren't even informed of this. So, it is concerning. I mean, we never ascribe bad intent to government. We don't. But it is concerning that obviously there's been some breakdown in the normal process. And secondly, obviously, there's very little time given to comment. But by the way, here's the key. We have the opportunity now to comment. Everybody must please make a comment. And we've made it super easy for people. Heinz, I think I sent something to you yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, I've posted that information on this post. So in the description of this video post, on whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, the link is there, and you can just go to the FORSA website, and it's 2 clicks away. It'll take you 2 minutes. I've done it. I can tell you it's quick and it's easy and it's straightforward. I think you go through to the DearSA site and then click and it's done. So we need to get as many people raising their voices, and this is a practical way to do that. And I would also call on people to pray that this thing will not go through as it is. But prayer is important, but we also need to take action. I always, on that principle, I always think of the story of David. There was the season in his life where he was praying and spending time with God when he was looking after the sheep. But then there was a day he had to actually pick up the stone and kill the giant. And prayer wouldn't have gotten him through that. He had to have prayed already, but now take action. And we are there. We are facing multiple giants in the spirit, and which is manifesting in the present. And this is one of them. I mean, Michael, this is not the first conversation we have about a bull. This is not the first time. I'm hearing the same pattern every time.
And probably not the last.
Yeah, they put out something. You guys and hopefully some other concerned people go, whoa, you can't do this, and then they revise it, and then they give you, we give you until, and then it's always the same thing, and it's always the same thing about the wording is so broad and so wide, it could be anything, and then when you criticize them, they go, no, but we'll never do that, and it's like, if you can, then you probably will. I think you made the example in one of our previous conversations that our Constitution is was actually a great piece of legislation that was well written, and no one ever thought that the language could be manipulated to mean what it has meant now in some constitutional cases. But they did. They found loopholes. They changed the language. It is scary. So we have to make sure that the language is right, that it doesn't open us up to stuff like that.
And here's the thing I want to say to everybody too. Whenever we get on with you, Heinz, and whenever we're speaking, we're always saying to people, while we have the opportunity to participate as the public, and that's our right, the government must give us that right, we've got to do it. And we can't be, there's a scripture in the Bible which says, do not be weary in well-doing, And I know sometimes it's like, another thing I've got to get involved with. I've got to do another. And the answer is yes, you do.
Yeah.
Because the moment you stop is the moment when they do whatever they want and you're not even having a say. Now,
Sure.
here's a good piece of news. One of the things that we were really involved with and we've been fighting for 5 years is the marriage bill, basically, because there's a process in place to consolidate all the marriage laws of South Africa into one.
Yeah.
And one of the big concerns was that there was a big push to force every single marriage officer, whether you're a religious marriage officer or not, to solemnize all types of marriage. Whether it goes against your conscience or belief or convictions, that's just too bad. You must just do what you're told, and that's that. We objected to that, and so did many other people. So we've been involved with the public participation process, and I'm glad to say that they've literally just this week released the new draft of this with the new wording, and there is an express specific clause that protects the conscientious objection rights of all religious marriage officers. You cannot be forced to solemnize a marriage that goes against your convictions and conscience and belief.
That's wonderful. Hallelujah.
That's powerful.
That's huge.
That we must get involved.
Yeah.
And don't just think, not another one. Rather think, I need to get involved.
Absolutely. And the best way to get involved is to support FORSA, because they are going in there, they're doing the work. None of us, let's be honest, none of us are going to read these pieces of legislation as light reading, before we go to bed. We need people who know how this works and what makes sense, and we have to support them and help them make this happen. So come on, get behind FORSA and help them to fight these fights. Talk about a good fight. They are fighting the good fight where it really matters, because they have averted so many things that I think most Christians don't even know about. And it's actually been not just to the advantage of Christians, but other people of religion as well, the different religions. And so, we applaud you. Thank God for you. Keep going. Don't stop. We will do what we can to support you. Sure. Okay, so marriage bill, we have a victory. That's great. I know that some people know there's a Bela bill, there's the hate speech bill, there are all these kinds of things. How many of them are still hanging, and how many have actually been signed into law? Do you have any other good news for us, or is there just more bad news?
I think good news. Liesl could talk about Bela, but the hate speech bill, we all climbed into that one. There were 3 public participation processes, over 250,000 people engaged in that.
Wonderful.
Now, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that 250,000 people participated in that public participation process. The matter is now sitting on the desk of the president. It's awaiting his signature.
Oh, yeah.
Parliament, unfortunately, went ahead and passed it, and they didn't do what we asked them to do. But here's the good news. The president hasn't passed it. He's under a lot of pressure not to pass it. I know that he's been personally written to by senior religious leaders representing literally millions of people, telling him, exercise what you can do as president and send it back to the National Assembly, because that bill is undoubtedly unconstitutional.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good.
If he doesn't, and if he passes it into law, because so many people stepped up and pushed back against it, and because government effectively will be demonstrably seen to have ignored what the people were asking for, we have a really, really good case, and we will absolutely institute immediately a court case to say you didn't do what the Constitution requires you to do, you didn't listen to the people. And if we get that right, number one, it will be a great precedent because it will make sure that they're going to be a lot more attentive to what the people say in the future. And number two, it has the potential to literally overturn that bill. It's back to the drawing board.
Sure.
So when you've participated in the past, don't think it's a waste of time. It's absolutely vital because it gives us, even if things don't go as we would like them to go, it gives us the ammunition to keep going with the fight.
Okay. Can I ask you a controversial question?
Ask Liesl.
So, what are the chances that there's a lot of pressure on this because of the upcoming elections? All these bills, including this Bible, do you think there's a link? Do you think they're trying to get as much passed as they can because they might lose some ground?
Yes.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
No, I think it's clear. I mean, that they have said that they want to fast track, that they do have a legislative program that they put forward that they wanted to complete during this Parliament, and obviously time's running out, the clock's ticking, because come May they have to basically close Parliament and there has to be a new election. So they're going to get as much done with the majorities that they now have as they possibly can. So that's not a secret. That's not a political sort of subversive statement. That's just a recognition of the reality of how government works. Well, that's how government works. Now, if the right people, perhaps, or different people get into Parliament next time around, well, maybe we'll have a different outcome.
Yeah.
But that's going to depend. Oh, and by the way, just on that, if I could say, one of the things that we FORSA are going to be doing, and we're going to be getting that to you as well, is we're going to be producing an election scorecard on how the different parties over the past 4 years have actually treated the right to religious freedom. Have they supported it or have they tried to erode it? It's not our opinion. It's all very simple. There are laws and bills and regulations during the last 4 years gone before Parliament and Parliamentary Committee, and members of different political parties have voted one way or another on whether they say yes to them or no to them. And we're just going to simply produce the scorecard, and it will then be plain for all to see who's actually supporting religious freedom and who's not. And then people can make up their mind, however important that may be when you cast your vote, but it will be an objective assessment of the religious freedom. What has actually happened, what different political parties have actually done over the last 4 years.
That's amazing. Well done. I would love to see that. That's really an election scorecard on religious freedom. That's powerful because religious freedom touches on so many things and is affected by so many things. And we have to take this seriously, not just for our faith community, but for all faith communities. You know, it's really powerful. We are so over our time, but I'm loving this conversation. Even if I'm the only one watching it, I'm like, this is great. But so I would like us to quickly touch on the upcoming school governing body elections. And you can both comment on this. Liesl, maybe first you and then Michael. Why is it important for Christians especially to get more involved in their local schools, especially public schools, obviously?
Okay, so this year, we will be electing new school governing bodies for public schools. And it's one of the most important elections this year, especially if you're a parent, because school governing bodies set the culture and context of their school. School governing bodies are the embodiment of the recognition and the legal recognition as well that parents and not the state are the primary educators of their children. They hold the primary right to choose what kind of education is best for their children, including the religious, cultural, and moral basis of that education. But parents simply cannot stand back and hope for the best. They need to participate. With that right becomes a responsibility. And how you exercise that responsibility in the best interest of your child is to ensure that you are involved in the school governing body elections if your child is in a public school. Now, how you are involved is that, first of all, you have to vote for suitable candidates. And if it's on your heart to also make a contribution in the best interest of the school community, then you need to complete a nomination form and stand for school governing body, but also support other parents who are also suitable candidates, because there are
Yeah.
more than one parent. Because parents, by law, hold the majority voting membership of the school governing body, so they have the final say. But it's just so important to ensure that you're on the school governing body, because school governing bodies have significant powers in order to, to do the governance of the school, to be that watchman, to be that gatekeeper. They
Yeah.
decide the vision and the values of the school, its mission, its ethos. They decide whether a school can invite a pastor to speak to the learners during assembly. They decide admissions policy, language policy, religious policy. They can decide whether for the life orientation subject, are we going to use CUC, or are we going to use an alternative values-based program that reflects the religious convictions and the moral values of the parent. They
Yeah.
can
Amen.
decide, appoint and promote which teachers are going to come into this school, because unfortunately there are teachers who are ideological activists, so they have a decision over that. Many schools rent out school facilities, the school hall, for a church to use that place to gather. The schools, the governing body will decide, are we renting out our school hall to a
Yeah.
church or not?
Yeah.
So it's so important for a parent to get on the school government, to have influence. And these school governing bodies, they're elected once every 3 years. So the parents who are elected this year onto the school governing body, they will set the culture and climate of that school for the next 3 years. They will influence a generation of children. So you had better ensure that you vote for the right candidates, or ensure that you're on that cool school governing body if you are a candidate. It's really a question not of should I be involved. You cannot afford not to be
Not to be
involved
involved.
as a parent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally learned this the hard way in my kids' schools, and I wanted to blame others for not doing what I think they should have done. And then I realized I'm not there making the decisions or helping influence the decisions. And I realized
Wow.
it's easy to point a finger, but I need to get involved. And so in just what we've done, and hope maybe this is something those who are listening can consider. Not everyone needs to necessarily stand and get in there, but let's get as many people around, a table who have similar values, like-mindedness, and be strategic. Let's try to get 3-4 people in there that we all know we can trust, and we can support them, because some people might listen. My kid is only in the school for another year, my kid just finished, but I really care what happens in the school. But there's someone like me who's still going to be there for a long time. That we let's get in there and let's do as much as we can. And because I think the other pressure, if I'm not mistaken, is that the Bella Bill, part of what there's a lot of bad things about it, but one of the bad things is it wants to apparently take away some of the SGB's rights and privileges and influence. Am I correct?
My understanding is that the Bella Bill does do that to an extent, and that is problematic. And there are
Yeah.
stakeholders like FORSA that is doing excellent work in that regard. The Bella Bill in its current form does not have a direct impact on freedom of religion. That's why we are not that directly involved with that.
Okay.
But
Okay.
even in its current form, the Bella Bill, the SGBs will retain significant powers, and as stakeholders like FORSA and others push to protect the powers of the SGBs, the
Okay.
maximum amount of power of SGBs will be retained.
That's good.
But
That's
either
good.
way, be on
Yeah.
the SGB. There's
Yeah.
no other. You cannot afford not to be. And I think it's wonderful, like what you said. Even if you cannot stand, support other candidates. And here's an important point. Even if your child leaves school the year after next, so you've got 1 year left, the fact that you have a child in your school entitles you to stand for the SGB. If you fall away after 1 year, they can have by-elections.
Okay.
So
Good to know.
if you feel that you can contribute for 1 year, stand.
Do
Nothing
it.
stopping you.
That's great. Michael, you want to weigh in on this?
Heinz, I think what I'd like to say, and I really hope that parents are listening, and even people who aren't parents yet who are listening, is this is a battle for the next generation. The battle for the next generation is being fought in the school system, in the education system. We know, for example, that there is a teacher training taking place, and we actually engaged with the Department of Basic Education on this. We're going to be meeting with them next week, in fact, again, for the second time, where they are teaching teachers, they are training teachers to tell little children, we're talking about pre-primary, primary school ages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that you cannot assume just by looking at somebody that they are a boy or a girl. That if your parents are telling you, and this is what they're teaching teachers to tell little children, that if your parents are telling you that there are only boys and girls, they're actually harming you and they're holding you back in life. And that in our classrooms now, so we're talking about pre-primary school, little children who've got no way of processing this. Number one, you're telling teachers to tell them your parents are lying to you and they're holding you back in life.
Yeah.
And then they're also saying, and also we're not going to use, for example, he and she anymore. We're going to use they and them, because you cannot tell whether somebody is a little boy or a little girl just by looking at them. Since when?
Yeah.
In all of human history, we've been able to identify. And if there's ever a single fact that you can literally say a fact is a fact is a fact, like it's there are men and there are women, there are boys and there are girls. This is not rocket science. This is not difficult. This is scientifically proven. It's part of who we're designed to be, to literally the very molecules of our bodies.
Yeah.
And yet they're telling these little children, no, that's not the case. Now, this is ideology.
Yes.
If you stand on a school governing body, you can stop, even if government wants to push it, you can still stop it. So even if they say, well, we're going to double down and we're going to push it, on the school governing body, you can stop it. Let me give you just one story quickly. And maybe I'll just close with this because it's just an indication. I know a school close to where I live. They celebrate Pride Month. That's an ideology. They celebrate it. Now, we're not saying we're anti-LGBT, not at all. They've got as much right to exist and be protected and respected and looked after as everybody else. But a whole month is there to celebrate that ideology, that lifestyle, so to speak.
Yeah.
In this school, if you wanted to leave the classroom, they had a pride flag in the classroom. You had to pick that pride flag up and go wherever you went carrying the pride flag, and you could only put it back and down again when you came back and sat down in the classroom. Is that education?
No.
Is that education? I'm just asking the question.
Indoctrination. It's indoctrination.
It's indoctrination. Sure. And it's potentially quite kind of threatening.
Yeah.
I happen to know people who are not going forward into schools because they're so concerned about that being the absolute dominating ideology of the high school. The parents won't send them from the primary school to the high school because that's so entrenched. Now, here's what you can do. If you're on the school governing body, do you know what you do? You say, out you go. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And they have to listen. If you're not on the school governing body and people who are activists get on and you just somehow sit back and think, well, okay, Sarah, then whatever will be, and you'll live with the consequences, and so will your children. Wow. So I think we need to wake up and get involved in these school governing bodies elections, because March is just around the corner and it's going to set the culture of the schools for the next 3 years.
Sure. So important. There's so much happening, and like you said, I think it can feel overwhelming to us, but we cannot allow this to just take place on our watch. It's I think people call it the Bonhoeffer principle, that all it takes for evil to reign is for good men to do nothing, and we have to stand. We have to stand for what we believe in, and actually take action. I think that's the thing now. We cannot just wait and hope for the best. We have to get involved. I really believe in that, and I'd like to end off with the thought that because a lot of times we hear these things. I've heard what you say. I've heard what people like Simon Brace, Afrika Mhlope, influential people who know so much more about a lot of the stuff that's going on. And you kind of go, whoa, okay, so what do we do? And Simon Brace actually said it so beautifully. He said, go home, love your wife, love your children, teach them Christianity, stand on the values, and don't let anyone touch them. and let disciple your home. It starts there. And if you do that well, it's going to start overflowing to your community, to the school that your kids are in. So we all have to just make a choice to do what we can where we are. Yes, Mike.
I'd like to add one more thing. Get involved in public participation processes.
Yes, absolutely.
As a citizen, even as a biblical citizen,
Yeah,
Get involved in the life of your community in a
absolutely.
practical way. Don't
And
allow these things to just come in and, yeah.
yeah, I mean, what's the saying? You know, you can't stop a bird from sitting on your head, but you can stop him from making a nest. So we now know. Now we can do something about it. Liesl, any final thoughts from you on the things we spoke about, or yeah, just your heart?
Heinz, I think it emphasizes, as Michael has said, the importance of the public participation process. We cannot afford to keep quiet. We need to use the rights that we have. Michael
Mm,
often quotes the saying, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And we have to do that with the laws going through Parliament and what's happening in the basic education sector. Because in the public school system, there has to be made space for all values and belief systems and worldviews because it's the public school system. All must be welcome.
yeah,
But we cannot have the imposition of one ideology or worldview to the exclusion of others. And that's why the parents need to be there to reflect the whole school community, all the views there, because that's true inclusion, that's true democracy. There's a space for everyone, but we are not, and we respect everyone, but nobody's going to force their views down another person's throat.
yeah. That's good. Thanks so much. So if you joined us now or what you're watching later, please look at the links in the description below. Go have your say about the spy bill and make sure that you stand for the school governing body or get involved. And then as a final thought, let's be good Christian citizens and be, not let stuff happen to us. Let us make things happen in our nation. Michael, thank you so much. Liesl, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Once again, keep doing what you're doing. May God bless you. And may you go from strength to strength and glory to glory. And one more call to everyone listening. Please support FORSA. Go to their website, donate, and be part of these amazing solutions and stuff that we're seeing. Thanks so much. God bless you all. Have a wonderful
Thank you,
day.
Heinz.
We'll chat soon.
Thank you,
I'm sure
Heinz.
we'll chat soon. All right. Bye-bye.